Three Righteous Mamas is a podcast that is on a mission to transform our country. We tell the stories that matter, celebrate the power and hope of pissed off mamas who are building a better future for all of our children. I'm Muna Husseini.
Hi, I'm Christina Sensun Ramirez.
Hi, I'm Martha Pincoffs.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And one of the things that we've been talking about a lot is how our country is going to move forward. And one of the things that seems to be at the forefront of that for us is kindness. How are we showing ourselves kindness? How are we showing others kindness? And for the mamas, how are we modeling kindness with our own kids? And I'm going to start by talking about a cartoon I watched today with my 4-year-old. Have either of y'all seen Bluey?
Yes, my kids are obsessed with Bluey right now.
What is Bluey?
So it is an
Australian
cartoon about a family of dogs, and it is just brilliant. And I love it because it's not cheese. They actually set up real situations with kids and show exactly how kids get frustrated and have feelings and get upset. But then they really model empathy and love and connection with each other in a way that is so beautiful. Like, for example, there was one little sketch in the cartoon today where there were grown-ups that were playing, was it squash or racquetball? And then the kids were watching and one of the adults kept winning. And the kid was like, hey, why don't we let the other grown-up win so that the other kid also feels good about winning? And her dad was like, no, that's not what adults do. And she was like, why not? It's what kids do. We're nice to each other. And he was like, no. And she was not having it. Bluey was not having it at all. And I just thought, wow, like, to be able to stand up to somebody who is powerful in your life, obviously, like, the kid has safety, but then the way they work through it, it was so sweet. I thought, this is my favorite cartoon ever. We are only watching this cartoon. I don't know, Martha, what about you? It sounds like
wait, before Martha answers, I need to know on what channel I can watch this.
Disney Junior, I think.
Okay, well,
Disney Plus, Disney Junior, something like that.
Disney.
My kids are totally obsessed with it, and the episodes are also really short. So it's like an 8-minute commitment, and you listen to Australian accents, which are pretty darling, and the puppies are cute and they do nice things. It's great.
All around fantastic review.
Yeah. And if they would like to sponsor Three Righteous Mamas, we'll take it.
You're right. There are really short sketches. The Australian accents are brilliant. And like the second episode we watched today, the kids were playing charades at grandma's house, and one of the kids kept losing it because she wanted to be the ballerina, and grandma had to pull all the kids into the other room and be like, what's the only rule at grandma's house? That everyone gets what they want. And the kids were like, okay, fine. Like, but then they committed to making the other kiddo be happy, and it was just so sweet how they all celebrated. And I just thought, oh, I really want to be able to teach my kids how to do that. And I felt like I learned something, that I need to just have that much grace with my own kids. And then again, it brought me back to, like, how am I modeling kindness? When do I show kindness? When they get something wrong, or they don't get into bed on time, or whatever it is. So it was a lesson for me, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I think with like the context of where we are as a country right now, my kids have been very aware of who Donald Trump is, and what his behavior has been like, and that he is very much a bully. And in his bullying, it is our job, because we have a lot of privilege. We have the ability to do it. It's our job to stand up and say, hey, we think that's wrong, and we're going to work to change things. And we're going to how we're going to choose to use our family energy and our effort. And like, and we've talked about this before, but like, to help them build agency to deliver kindness, because it doesn't just happen right now.
Yeah.
Like, it actually requires thought and intention, and choosing to say, in this moment, what we're going to do is we're going to choose kindness. And that means sometimes saying hard things and standing up to people, because that
I love that you said that, Martha, because you know, Santi's a little bit younger than your kids, and I've just been feeling like, oh, we're about to like shake off this bully, you know? And I think about the things I fear for Santi that would just like break my heart as he gets older. And it's the idea that he could be a bully to someone, or the idea that he could be bullied. Like either
Right.
one of those just terrifies me. Like as a
Totally.
mom, it would break my heart. But also the idea that if he saw someone else being bullied, that he would be silent. Um, you know, I'm like a fighter that has always been angry when I see someone being bullied, when I see something that's unfair. And it's because my parents taught me to stand up when you see something that's unfair. And that was instilled in me as a child when I was so little that it wasn't enough to just see something, but it was your job to act, and it was your job to correct it and make it so. And so for me, it's about not just like telling our kids to be kind to other people, but the ability to say that is wrong as a 6-year-old kid and say, I'm going to fight back against that. I'm going to tell you you're wrong and you're not allowed to do that to someone else. And I have nothing to gain from it besides the conviction and understanding that I did what is right. Like teaching our kids the ability to stand up for what is right. And that helps long term in their lives. And it starts like when they're just little babies.
Right, because they're building skills, and then just wait, because they're going to use it on you. Like
No,
my
Santi's
kids,
exactly like this until he's like 20. What do you mean? I'm so
yeah, my kids point out injustice that Joe and I bring to our house all of the time, and I'm so proud of them. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I would have like gotten pinched if I had done that, but I'm really proud of them too, because they're using it, and they're not afraid to use it on us, which means I hope they aren't afraid to use it in the world, and help make the places where they are in community healthy bodies that stand up and say this is right, or this is wrong, and we won't stand for it, or whatever it is.
I will say my parents taught us legitimate authority, and we were not allowed to question their authority. But in the outside world, by all means, stand up for what is right. But not in here.
Christina,
I might have messed that one up.
Careful on the advice, Martha.
I can't agree more on the modeling. I believe that my parents also taught me the same thing, and I think it was intrinsic. My parents tell me stories about, I think I was 4 or 5, and I have an older brother, and maybe some kid took his toy at the playground, and I'd be out there going, I'm getting this toy back. I don't care who the kids are. And I was ready to fight. But with that said, not every instance of, we'll call it difficulty or bullying, happens in some sensational way, right?
Yeah.
And it makes me also think about the strength of our children being able to hear their own voice and holding on to it, to be able to honor, okay, like, is what I'm thinking inside going to be able to match the thing I'm going to do outside? And it takes a lot for those two things to be the same, right? Like our children have to have that safety. And so as much as you're laughing here, Martha, for your kids to disagree with you tells me that you've given them that safety, and hopefully they're not just brats, but I'm joking because
they're quite polite.
not like my kid who's lost it the 3 times we got together prior to COVID. So what can I say?
Oh no, I think we all have really good kids in this world.
They're all really good, but like I do think that, you know, the muscle memory, like I think of I think back to myself. I know we're gonna talk to this incredible guest named Holly, and her story about, you know, growing up and not feeling like she was a girl and trying to figure out her own self and being bullied and having to go through that. And I think about, as a kid, the moments that I'm most proud of growing up and the moments that I'm most ashamed of, right? The moments that I'm most proud of is when I stood up for something I believed in and there was a price for it, but I'm proud that I made the right choice. right? And the things I'm most ashamed of, like I think back to sometimes a middle school girl that sometimes was mean to other girls. And like, oh, I still like feel ashamed of that person, and I was 12. And I think when you act from a place that is not kind, that is not caring towards other people, you can carry that shame for a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want our kids to know how to. I think that's something I would love, like, for our guests, our listeners, to tell us how they are trying to teach their kids to practice kindness, to practice love, to practice righteousness, right?
Right.
Even when they're very little people.
Did you hear that, listeners?
Let us know. We'd love your advice.
Hi, everybody. I am so excited to introduce you to my friend Holly Lorka, who has just written a brilliant and hilarious and tender book called Handsome. I'm going to tell you about Holly by reading the bio in the back.
Oh, no.
Holly Lorka is a writer, storyteller, and retired stand-up comedian whose work has been included in several anthologies and podcasts, including Dan Savage's Hot Mic and Three Righteous Mamas. What? Her stories of gender, sex, and shame have earned her a following in Austin, Texas, where she lives and works as an ICU nurse and a super sharp wedding officiant. Handsome is her first book. Holly, welcome.
Yes. Hi. Thanks, Martha. Thanks for having me, y'all.
Thank you so much for being here. Like we were just talking about, we talked before, but I want to let the audience know that this is one of the most refreshing and delightful books that I have read in a really long time. And it made me laugh, and it made me cry a little bit. And it gave me a mirror to see parts of myself that I never see reflected in media and literature. And so it is always a beautiful thing to read voice that is often not out there, and a well-written one at that. So way to go, Holly.
Thanks. It's touching to me that people mention the word poignant or heartfelt or endearing, because I feel like that is what really reaches across to get people. And yeah, I'm funny and some outrageous things have happened to me, but I feel like if I can keep it tenderhearted, that I can reach folks and kind of help to show that we're all the same. Yeah. And I mean, we all just want love and to be loved. Yeah. And so I feel like that's the common language, regardless of the subject.
I think so too. And I think that we circle that, in a lot of conversations. The question that we always start the podcast off with is the same for everyone. And it is, in what way did your mom or a mother figure shape you in the way that you engage with the world today? And so, having read the book, I've been really interested to just pop that one right off the bat.
Wow. My mother and I did not have a good relationship. She was not a warm person. She had a difficult time showing love, showing affection, even touching us. And she was very angry that I think that she felt like her life got kind of sucked away by a family and children. And so luckily that put me into therapy so that I could learn that one of the things that I'm here to learn is how to engage with people emotionally. And that was one of the things that I was trying to do with the book, because I used that as a way to kind of let people in and show people, because I was very into hiding and, I wasn't allowed to have my own emotions when I was a kid. And so a lot of my adult life in the book is kind of taking ownership of my emotions, figuring out how to feel the things, and making an awful lot of mistakes because I didn't have the feeling of loving myself unconditionally that a mother, can give to her children. So it's been a giant challenge, but I'm working on it, man.
So Holly, you've written like the super funny, super fucking real book. And I feel like you're in kind of this very interesting class of having written memoir as also a gender nonconforming person. So, there's all of like, a handful of books out there right now. And so I just want to ask you, like, what were the things you were thinking as you started to write your own story? Did it weigh on you at all that you were going to be other, especially like younger people that are trying to figure out their place? Your book may be the book that they pick up that helps them figure that out. So like, just the complexities of writing about yourself, what you include, what you don't include, and the responsibility and weight, and the privilege of writing your own story that will speak to a lot of other younger folks that I'm sure when you were growing up, there was nothing out there like that for you.
There was nothing out there. I have to be honest and say that I didn't write these stories with the thought of helping people. I wrote these stories just because I felt like they had to come out. This was my contribution. This is what came to me to write. But as I put it together, I realized the power that this would have to children who were, genderqueer, to parents of children who were genderqueer, because I feel like I can charm people into reading things that they wouldn't normally read. And I just feel like I can open the door to a lot of people to help them understand what this experience is like. And I think it's going to be really important. People don't talk about this stuff in an honest enough manner, or they get a little defensive about it. And it makes it very difficult to have honest conversations about this. And I feel like I wrote something that's approachable, that anyone can pick up and gain a better understanding about what the situation is like. Did I set out doing that? No, I just wrote the way. This is what I've been given. This is how I write. But then, I know enough about what I've done to say in the first chapter, like, we've got to start telling kids how it really is. Don't let your kid read this book, but maybe start having conversations with them so they don't think that like E.L. James, and 50 Shades of Grey is how sex is going to be for them, or Judy Blume, or the Harlequin romances that we all got a hold of when we were kids. Like, that's not real life. We've got to teach kids that things are awkward and they have to honor themselves with that. So I didn't set out to do it, but I see what it is. And, George Michael comes back to tell me what I'm here to do with it at the end.
Which is so fucking cool.
And we're really proud for this podcast that we really want to welcome people that are learning, right? People that are learning about each other. And that so much of the way we ended up in the last 4 crazy years of the Trump presidency was also folks not talking to one another, not understanding each other's experiences. And obviously we hope everyone buys Handsome and reads it. But also, can you tell folks, what does it mean when you say genderqueer? What does that mean for a person that's like, I don't know, I don't understand what that means. And for you, like how you came to identify as the person you are today.
So I feel like I was either born in the wrong body or with the wrong hormone expression. When I was a child, I knew very well that I was supposed to be a boy or a male. Obviously it was the 70s. No one was having these conversations. I felt like I was a monster and like I was going to have to kill myself and no one would love me. And I don't know how, but I made it. Like, I just kind of got really good at softball and put my nose down and got really good grades in school and just kind of made it to adulthood, still feeling like I'd been ripped off to some degree by whoever my maker was. I didn't get the right parts. But I just kind of slowly learned how to integrate who I was with this body and figure out workarounds. And then once people started having the conversations about, being trans, I was like, oh, like maybe I'm trans. And so I explored going that way for a while and just realized that I had top surgery and that was fantastic, but I don't want to change my voice. I don't want to change my hair. I don't want to identify as male. I go by she, her. And I'm just kind of comfortable living in the middle and maybe causing people to question some things when I walk by or when I go into the women's bathroom. I feel like I am a kind of a gateway for people to try to understand some of these things. And also because I'm happy to have conversations with anyone about what it's like to live in the middle. I don't want to give up all my femaleness and I don't want to jump all the way into maleness. So I have become very comfortable just straddling the middle. And sometimes I go rip trees down in my backyard and I don't know what the female expression of who I am is, but I don't feel the need to be 100% one or the other. And I feel like this is the way life is. The binary is false. Everyone identifies on a spectrum, whether they will admit that or not. Yeah, the whole binary thing is baloney.
It is. And you, in the book, you talk about, being called sir out in the world. And I am often called sir in the world. In fact, I was at REI yesterday and the woman was like, yes, sir, you're next. And she gets real embarrassed when I get up there. And like, I kind of enjoy the experience. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I also live somewhere in the middle. I don't know how, I have an enormous rack and that I don't understand how that gets missed, but my haircut is shorter.
It's the haircut. It's
the
people
haircut.
Just don't see beyond the haircut. And I want to be like, okay, maybe I'm like a lot more muscular and tall than, no, that's not it at all. And I don't mind being called sir. It's great. And I almost don't want to talk to people when they do that because I don't want to open my mouth and embarrass them because I don't want to have that conversation. I don't want any apologizing for any of this. It's fine. Let's move along.
It's good.
Like, yeah.
So while we're on the topic, I want to say that as we were preparing amongst ourselves, we even had certain questions and we're curious, like, okay, how do we go forth in this conversation knowing that we could mess up and say the wrong thing and do the wrong thing? And so with some grace, maybe Martha, you and Holly can give us a little education because there are lots of letters and maybe common terms. For example, you just talked about pronouns. And so for our audience, which may not be familiar, can you talk to us about whatever comes up for you as common terms or things that we might want to educate folks on? I think that's perhaps a good place to start and maybe just benchmark for our audience. And so yeah, take us away.
So I think the older we are, the more fixed the binary is in the mind. And then the younger generations have a much broader understanding of what the binary is and where pronouns fit in that. And so Holly and I are Gen Xers, which puts us in the more fixed range, I would say, where like I also go by she, her. I am not mad when anybody calls me he, him, his, like whatever. I get it. I think it's kind of funny. Little kids that were in school with River used to be like, hey, River's dad, River's dad, River's dad. And I would be looking around and I'm like, who the fuck is River's dad? And I'm like, oh, they're talking to me. Hey.
Sweet.
Yes. And I am a tomboy, which, I've been a tomboy since I was 6 years old or before. Like that has been who I am my whole life. And I got away from myself and tried on femininity and straightness. And if I had stayed there, I would have died. I mean, I really would have died. Like that is why I don't drink anymore, because I had to drink to wear that skin that does not fit me. It is not the way that I am made. And so, Holly, what do you think?
So the language is continuously evolving, and I work with a population. I work with a trans community, and every day I learn new words and new acceptable terms. So we used to say that the surgery that we offered was gender reassignment surgery, and then no, that's not correct because the people are born the correct gender. We're just helping them to become it. And then it was gender confirmation is kind of the accepted term now for what we do. In terms of feeling trans, they use the word gender incongruence for how you feel, gender dysphoria, gender dysmorphia. But the terms, I believe, are continually evolving to make them more correct, which I love. Language evolves, and so these terms are going to evolve. I, for one, despise labels. I feel like putting people, like sorting people, sorting genders, it doesn't do us any good. It keeps us from discovering who or what's behind that. Like, who is the person behind the labels that you are giving them? I think it's important that we try to understand what the labels mean, but we shouldn't try to sort people automatically. And I use the term non-binary, but that sounds so scientific and it sounds so off-putting that I like the term middle. I like the term hybrid much better. I feel like that helps to describe me more. My journey is different than everybody else's journey. So I am she, her. A lot of people use they. There was Z for a while. I don't know that if that's still in vogue or whatever, but the whole thing is that we want to respect people and their own identity by using their correct pronouns. And I feel like it will be easier now since the election to understand how important this is for people. You know, you get to identify how you want, and you get to, like, why can't I say that I want to be they if I want to be they? Like, why do you need to take that from me if that's what I want? So I think it's hugely important that we're having these conversations. All kids, like, they will announce their pronouns to you. Kids are so much further along this than we will ever be. So I think that if we could give a nod to the kids and follow what they're doing, we'd be doing so great.
I also think, like, when I think about God or creator or whatever, I think that being is not in the binary, right? Like, that is a non-binary being. That is somewhere where everybody lives and has space to be who they are. The other thing that I think it's really important when we talk about, particularly about the trans experience, is that the suicide rate for the trans community it's like 40% of the trans community attempts suicide. And if you think about what can we do to make their lives easier, to make this world more comfortable, like, honoring their pronouns and is a great place to start. But, like, it is really all back to the human experience.
Yeah, I find it really interesting. I'm Muslim, and in the Quran, when it's translated, God is referred to as a he, but God has no gender. And I've always struggled with that. And then when I feel like this concept of pronouns was becoming more popular, I thought I need to use this neutral term to refer to God. And it just worked. It just worked. And it gave me so much freedom because God has no gender. And so if God is genderless, why is God a he? It really rubbed me the wrong way. And so I thought it's a really interesting concept. And thank you for educating us. And I guess my next question would just be around, I do have friends that are gender or non-conforming, binary, trans. I also, like, while I have an understanding of things, I may not get everything right. What guidance would you give me in how to deal with things if I feel like I've put my foot in whatever I'm saying, or I've said something weird? How is the most graceful way to deal with that?
Apologize, move along, work hard at not doing it again. Don't make it a big deal. Unless that person makes it a big deal, don't, because it happens all the time to these people, and it gets really cumbersome and tiring. But if they know you're working on it, that means the world to them.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. I think that was some good education. And I've actually got a question about what you said earlier. You said that you grew up, I guess, in a situation where love wasn't freely handed out. And luckily, you went to therapy and you learned how to engage with people emotionally. It's kind of a big transition to go from hiding and not being allowed to have emotions to then being full with your emotions and then being able to share them in your truth. And what was that journey like for you?
I think that writing had a lot to do with it. I had to learn to accept myself fully as someone who's maybe not the norm. I mean, we know that the word normal is not really acceptable anymore, but when I first started writing this book, it started with one of the last stories, the story where I kind of told my whole gender journey. I was a stand-up comedian before that, and I didn't like myself very much. I felt like I was throwing my voice, and it's very smoke and mirrors. I wanted people to like me, maybe not for who I was. And so I sat down and wrote that story, and I wrote about all the things that I'd forgotten about my struggles, about hiding and all the shame. And writing that story was probably the most cathartic thing I ever did. I write in the book that it was like digging chunks of me out and putting it on my desk for me to see. It was stuff that I had buried and hadn't looked at since it happened when I was 4 or 5 or 6 or 8. And so I spent a couple of months with that first story and just cried and cried and cried and realized that, there's a reason why I felt emotionally stunted. Yes, it was my mother, but it was also the fact that I just tried to hide the essence of who I was. And once I stopped doing that by writing about it and writing these stories, I gained such a peace on the inside. And I felt like I could I could acknowledge who I was and fall in love with it, and then start showing it to the world. And luckily, I've been able to tell these stories that I've written to audiences around Austin, and I've gotten very good feedback. And I feel like I've touched a lot of people, and they told me that I've helped them to understand maybe what these experiences are like. And so the whole thing has been this powerful kind of movement for me. These stories in this book were an enormous tool for me to fall in love with myself and then be able to deal emotionally with other people.
For the statement you just made about, I was telling jokes, I was being funny, but I didn't like myself. Was that survival for you?
Yeah, I think I learned how to be really, really funny when I was a kid, to kind of deflect feeling less than or feeling weird. I feel like I made a lot of friends by being funny, so that maybe people wouldn't look at this other weirdo side of me. Like, didn't I know how to fix my hair or walk in girl shoes or carry a purse? So I think I just became really funny, and being funny for me was a way to get attention in my family structure too. So I feel like and you develop coping mechanisms as a child, and you use them until they fail as an adult. And that's what happened when I was doing stand-up comedy. I was doing great at it, but I felt like just a shell of who I was. So when I realized that, I quit, and no one could understand why I would just quit. And I was like, because it doesn't make me feel good anymore. It makes me feel like shit. And these stories saved me.
Was it in the beginning? Because I feel like humor is sometimes a tool to tell the truth, and humor is also a tool of deflection. Was it like in the beginning a way to speak a truth, but it was really, or was it always deflection?
I will tell you that the first joke I ever wrote or told on stage was about how I would have sex with my Barbie in my bed. So I think that was truth. I think in the beginning it was less truth and more deflection. And then, like, the more deeply I grew into myself, the more it was just truth. And there's stuff in the book that I don't want to tell you, but I feel like I've got to tell it to you because I'm on this journey. Like, I don't want to tell everybody the minutia of my sex life. I mean, my father read this book. My aunts and uncles have read this book. And I've just got to live with the fact that I wasn't going to half-ass this. If I was going to do it, I was going to do it all the way. And I didn't actually think that everybody in my family was going to buy a damn copy of my book. I mean, I'm really grateful that they have, but I'm a little bit more uncomfortable with that than I thought I would be, even though, yeah, I tell all my secrets in the book. But somebody's got to hear about the dildos. Somebody's going to have to understand how it is.
It's true.
Actually, every time I see a movie and like someone is naked, I'm like, oh my God, their parents are going to see that. That's what I think.
And the first story of the book is how I'm giving this guy a hand job in the bedroom next to my dad while he's taking a nap. I'm like, oh God, Dad, I'm sorry.
She does open the book by saying, I'm really sorry about some of these stories, Dad. We don't ever have to talk about them.
I also know we started the podcast being like, say whatever you want. Totally say whatever you want. We should put a forewarning on if your children are in the room.
If Holly Lorka is on it, it's not safe for work or family, just so you know.
Just so you know.
Holly, so one of the things that
Sorry, I just have to say, it's not just a content warning for kids. My parents, I remember I went to go watch some movie one time, and it was, for whatever reason, it just feels worse when it's like Indian people. I think it was The Namesake, and the movie has South Asian people in it, and the movie starts with, I think they're talking dirty or pillow talk, and I was sitting next to my mom in the theater and I was mortified. And so the warning can be for adults also.
Right.
Now I feel
Right.
like I have to add, my parents are like total opposite. Silence of the Lambs, like lovemaking scene. I saw that, I think, when I was 7 or something. Not Silence of the Lambs.
I was going to say, there's no sex
totally
scene in
different.
I don't
Silence of
think
the
it works.
Lambs.
Totally different movie.
Lovemaking.
Dances with Wolves. I was thinking of Dances with
Dances
Wolves.
with Wolves. Lovemaking, yes.
Totally different.
Silence of the Lambs.
I was like, what movie did you watch? That was not the same movie I watched.
It was not. You were like, oh, everybody's like, what? No, Dances with Wolves, and there's like a lovemaking scene in it. And I remember I said, gross. And my dad was sitting next to me and watched it at the theater, and I covered my eyes, and he took my hands off, and he's like, that's love. You should watch it.
I grew up in a house where we change the channel when people hold hands. But anyways, I was just saying, on the content warning, let's keep going.
There it is. So one of the things that when you and I were hanging out, it was probably 12 or 15-ish years ago, more regularly. Like I would see you a lot.
Mhm.
And I was not in a place of self-love. You were doing stand-up then. And so we were probably very much shells kind of bouncing off each other.
Mhm.
And we always had fun, and we always like performed. But it's funny, in the years since we've been really seeing each other, I think that we've both been on a trajectory and a journey to self-love, which has saved everything for me. Right?
Yeah. It saves everything for everybody. But
Right.
but I'm of the belief that many of us come here like that. We are shells because it takes a while to grow into yourself. I think that you don't even know who you are under your shell for a long time for some of us. And so I think that's just one of the joys of getting older is, your skin gets a little bit more loose and your hair turns gray, but I feel like you learn more about what's underneath. And
Mm-hmm.
if there's grace in your life, you can fall in love with that,
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say, when I was going through a hard breakup of my ex then, Nevi, and I was leaving for Utah, and Holly gave me a Swiss Army knife with a little note that said, every girl should go on a new adventure with a Swiss Army knife. And it was like, I still have the knife. I've given my son the replica of it, and don't tell my daughter, but she's getting one on Wednesday for her birthday. But like, that kindness has always been you, and it was you gave that kindness to me in a moment when I was really scared.
I'm glad. I forgot that I did that, but I went through a phase in my life where I gave everyone Swiss Army knives if they were going to do something. Yeah, it's a good gift.
Yeah.
I don't know. People remember if you're thoughtful, and how much effort does it take to be thoughtful. And I've gone through some shit things. There's a story in the book about when I was leaving Oregon and I was broken. And this greasy old man at a gas station saw me crying and just gave me the biggest hug. And it's just the kindness of strangers sometimes can just save you in a moment where you're so desperate. But kindness of friends too. Like if I know you're having a hard time and going on a big adventure, I'm going to have to start reinstituting the Swiss Army knife thing again. I think that's real good. It's a good one.
Yeah.
I have said so many times, Holly, I don't know if you know, but I've been a victim of hate crimes because I wear a scarf. And I have said so many times that the kindness of strangers saved my life, literally in a moment. For example, I was walking and I was almost stabbed in public, and I was saved by a complete stranger. To this day, I have no idea who that person is, and they saved my life. And it was such a hard time in my life where I didn't, like, when I hear you both talking about feeling like a shell, feeling scared, not being able to see yourself the way that you need to be, I can't help but relate at that time in my life where I couldn't feel safe in my own skin. I didn't feel safe in my home. I didn't feel safe going outside. Maybe I can take my scarf off, but I can't rip my skin off. And, you know, I've had a lot of folks ask me, like, why are you so comfortable with folks who are LGBTQ, or why are you so supportive? And I go, I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. And I also don't want anyone to tell me who I need to be or not need to be. I want to be who I am. I want to follow what I believe is important and honor myself. And I just feel so driven to defend that choice for everyone. And I at least was struggling through something, I think, in a national moment of turmoil. But I see the struggle that you both went through as sort of feeling very disconnected, right? Like you went through this struggle almost on your own. Like you said earlier, in the 1970s, there wasn't a lot of education or maybe focus around your progression or your growth or your story. What does that look like over time for you to be able to find that acceptance? You know, and I say this maybe from a place of, I'd like to say privilege right now, because there seems to be so much more education where people they know what a hijab is. They know, you know.
Some people, you were.
That's what I was saying. Like maybe it's a position of privilege. I don't know. Maybe the LGBTQ community has more acceptance right now. I'm not sure. Not that it's like, you know, a competition.
I think that is 100% the main reason why I wrote this, was that reason, is to show people what it was like before anyone knew what was going on, and to show that, you know, kids go through very real struggles. And, you know, and maybe nowadays, if it's not with the LGBTQ, I think like people struggle with everything, and they struggle with self-loathing and self-hatred and shame and embarrassment and humiliation. All children suffer with this because we aren't open about the real things in life. And that is the main reason why I wrote this book, is I wanted to choose what I could do to show my shame, tell all the stories about my shame, and help air it out. So maybe somebody can read this and be like, oh, I went through that, or I feel the same way right now. I don't need to hate myself. It's normal.
You know, we're talking to you and after the election, and I've been thinking a lot about like how 70 million Americans voted for Trump, and like how do we make people connect, you know, that actually have very different lived experiences, but also allow people to be who they are and be seen in all their differences and celebrated, and that not be a threat to people. And I was thinking a lot about like the common experience of like, we all hate bullies. For the most part, we all hate bullies. Like in the movie, the bully is never the hero. The bully is the person who we love as a country and as a people is actually the underdog. And I think because at the end of the day, like you said, like human suffering is for everyone, right? It's like a shared human experience. The idea that like even the people that seem really secure actually feel like outcasts. And then at some point in their life, it's like, that's why we connect to that experience. And then I think as a mom, like anytime I see a movie now where a kid is getting bullied, I just get so hurt, like devastatingly hurt for that child and angry, because we know how resilient our kids are, but also how fragile they are in their goodness. And so like the fact that you've come out as kind, as big-hearted, as strong in your empathy as you are, given all the shit you've gone through as a kid, is like incredible. And I think just speaks to like how big your heart is.
Thank you. That means a lot, but I think it's a common thing for people who have gone through very difficult things and feel like they've gotten help from strangers or support. Like, I feel like it makes people more empathetic to have gone through something difficult because we've been there. You know, we know what it's like to not have friends or allies, or to feel like you're alone on the planet. Like you are the only one struggling with what your struggle is. I feel like if you can overcome that, what you want to do is help people. Like then that can become the reason why you were given the struggle. why else would you have to struggle so hard? You have to use it for something. I feel like that's part of the catharsis of the experience.
So let me ask you, I know like obviously a lot of our listeners are moms or parents, and you know, thinking back to that lovely picture of that young girl on the cover of Handsome. We'll show it again.
So cute.
So cute. Look at the braces, the haircut, the bangs.
I mean, it's
I think we all had that haircut.
Mine was actually very similar when I was 5. But I'm thinking about like, you know, what advice do you have to parents that are listening about how and when they check in with their kids to let them know, like have a conversation about who they love, who they are, how they identify, you know? And this is just like first question, then I have a follow-up question, but.
So I don't have kids, so I don't know how much of an
But you're an
authority I
uncle,
can.
Holly.
No, but I'm thinking about
several
little girl
uncles.
Holly that
Yeah.
you were. I'm thinking about little girl Holly that you were, and what would have helped you as a little.
Oh, that's so hard, because I knew when I started having these thoughts that they were wrong and that they were shameful. And so I knew I just had to deep dive hide it, because no one was talking about it. I feel like in a household, if parents are having open conversations about love, you know, if everyone knows somebody who's gay, or, you know, like maybe talk about that person within the family or the family circle and who they love, and that it's normal and that everything's fine. Just open all the doors, and let the kid decide, I think. I don't know if kids nowadays say, I'm supposed to be a girl or I'm supposed to be a boy. I know some do, but I don't know if all of them know enough to do it. If it's free enough for them as children now in 2020 for them to be able to have the language for that. I don't know. But just open all the doors. And if you suspect something about your child, then maybe try to encourage a conversation about it, or show them examples of adults or other people in their life that perhaps they know that they can identify with in these ways. I think that would help them to feel much safe about it. Also, allow them to talk to other people about it. Like I have a young girl, she's 6 or 7, and she's questioning her gender. And so I make sure that I make time to hang out with her, and her mom kind of lets me have time with her. And we don't sit around and just talk about that. We just hang out, but I can be kind of a role model for her, or just somebody to let her know that, hey, it's okay to just be this way. And it doesn't have to be the focus of our conversation or our relationship, but hey, here I am hanging out with you and I'm fine. And you can be whoever you want to be.
So we're coming out of, I think, 4 very dark years, and the 4 years are not over. And to me, they're not going to be over till
January.
Yeah. And obviously for all of us on this call, like I'm Latina, my husband's a dreamer, Muna's Muslim, Martha's queer. It's been a rough 4 years for all of our families. But for folks that are listening, like we have come so far in how queer families are accepted in this country, but we still have a long way to go. And so I'm wondering for you, what does real allyship look like for you? You know, thinking of kindness of strangers. What does that look like for you? And what's your advice for folks on that?
Don't yell at me in the bathroom. How about that? Start there.
Start there. If somebody is yelling at you in the bathroom, don't make Holly be the one to stand up and stop it. Like, the person being yelled at should never be the one that has to stop it.
Yeah.
Right. I will stop it. Like, I'm fine. I'm taller than most people, so it's okay. But yeah, listen to people. Have conversations with folks. Be willing to hold space for people who are different than you. Don't assume anything. Just be open. Forget the labels and just try to connect with a person as an individual instead of as a member of this group of whatever. Because I think when we start to label, it's easier for us to see people as other. And that's the beginning of a lot of problems. We are all the same. On the inside, we are all the same people. And we have somehow forgotten that. And hopefully we can start getting back to that.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us, for putting pen to paper and writing your story, your authentic story that's rich in humor, rich in love, and also just really powerful, because I think it is powerful when we tell our stories that we don't see other places. And so, you know, the heart, again, like I know I already told you, but again, I just want to say it again, that people that go through the pain of being bullied, of feeling outcasted for so long in their lives, like Martha said, you know, what is it, 40% of trans folks end up trying to commit suicide. Like that often feels like the way out for people because of the pain they live every day, and that you are a survivor, but a survivor that came out with more heart, more empathy, more strength and courage. And not everyone can do that, unfortunately, but I think that's why your story is so awesome, and everyone needs to buy this book and read it. And thank you for being with us.
You guys are great. This podcast and what y'all are doing is fantastic. Keep going. Hopefully January 20th will shed a different light on a lot of things, but y'all are fantastic. I love that this content is out there for people to learn.
This episode means a lot to me because I really just do feel like we came off of we're coming off of the 4 worst years of a bully. Like a bully that used his position to beat down all of our communities, but also folks like Holly. But I also think about like the wisdom that people like Holly have. So in high school, I've talked to you all before, my best friend, Kevin, in high school came out as trans. It was Katie before and came out as trans when I was in high school. And I saw how hard that transition was for him and how unsupportive his parents were. And that he also, you know, thought about ending his life and was in deep depression for years because he just didn't feel like he fit in anywhere. And I felt so lucky because my mom, when we were really little, I still remember like being 5, 6 years old. My mom sat all of us down, all of her kids together, and was like, I just want you to know, whoever you love, that mommy's always going to love you and that it's okay. You know, and when I was little, I just didn't even understand what she was saying, but it stuck with me. And it made me, I never, ever thought there was anything wrong with being gay. I never thought there was anything wrong with being queer or trans. And it was just that one conversation my mom had with me when I was 6. And I'm so grateful for her wisdom to do that. You know, my mom has like a 8th grade education. She is so wicked smart, so smart.
It just strikes me how much strength and generosity Holly has to go from being in hiding and not being allowed to have feelings to then fully sharing your authenticity and your vulnerability. And, you know, I'm still cringing a little bit thinking about her parents reading that book, because I know how big my family is into modesty. And I'm like, wow, like that takes a lot of strength. And that's in spite of dealing with so much difficulty. I'm very much in awe right now.
Yeah. I think a lot about how the queer community in so many ways connects us all. There are Muslim queers, there are Latinx queers, there are Black queers, there are queers everywhere. But among us, they are often the least safe physically, particularly the trans kids. And I remember sitting through 13 hours of testimony against the bathroom bill and listening to these kids, these exceptional kids, like stand up and ask. They have to present so exceptionally that I could watch them trying to gain their worth through their exception, not their worth through their existence. And I see that in so many for so many people that are on the margins, is that when people are on the margins, they aren't exceptional just because they exist. And there is a real like I revere the trans kids for surviving. I revere them for existing and for showing us a broader, more inclusive way of existing in the world. I think that they are brave and wonderful and beautiful. And
have you ever read the book? I know Holly's not trans, but I think there's a lot of great lessons from the book, Transgender Warriors.
I haven't read it.
So I read it, I think back like right after I graduated high school, because my friend asked that I read it to understand what he was going through. And it's by Leslie Feinberg. He's passed away now, but it's really about the history of trans folks. And
Yes.
I think we didn't talk about it with Holly, but trans folks have always existed, and they've existed in all cultures. And what I loved reading about the book was also learning about how Native folks across the Americas always would call trans folks two-spirited people, that they were revered in the culture because they could see into two worlds and understand that, and that was considered a gift. And I really hope we can come to a place as a country where, not just for trans folks, but folks that can walk in different identities, that we realize that those are gifts, right? That they're not, to be able to see things multidimensionally or in ways that other people can't, is actually this massive opening, and that other people can learn from that.